We are taking a look at Extra Factors Annual 3 today. The supersized annual that ties in with the Evolutionary War, the 1988 crossover from Marvel. Not a very good crossover, but it adds a very enjoyable issue at the end and a decent one at the start here. As this cover shows, we are gunning to see Armageddon fight with the Evolutionary. I probably should have done this a few weeks ago when Galactical Guardians 3 came out, because Evolutionary is the bad guy in that. The depiction of Evolutionary in this, and in most of the crossover, it is more in line with what is in the movie. He is a bad guy in this. I would say that is quite out of character because he is above such distinctions. He is Cullin, a race of subterranean moloids, because they are a Evolutionary dead end. This isn't really in character for him. This seems more like something Armageddon would do. Armageddon believes in survival of the fittest, and Evolutionary, he believes in natural selection, but exterminating the weak is not really something I think Evolutionary would do. This is the first part of the Evolutionary War, and we open with some genocide. But one of these moloids has developed psychic powers, which makes them no longer the dead end Evolutionary thinks they are. And that one's death releases a psychic scream which is heard by the telepaths of the Marvel Universe. I am always thrilled to see Emma Frosty's in a comic, but most of you will be creaming your pants over Dr. Drew making a cameo. We see a bit more of Emma Frosty's in the New Muties tie-in, which I will look at after I have at least looked at the issue with Magma and M-Plate. It offers some context. And then Dr. Doom is gone and presumed dead by the time we get to the Avengers tie-in. One of the other changes that happens amid crossover is Smurf. In this first part, as you can see, he is still in his human form, but by the Avengers part, the final part, he is in his furry Smurf look again. The highlight of this issue is obviously, without a doubt, Armageddon and his interactions and his battle with the Evolutionary. This seems to be where the effort went with this issue, and the rest of the story, which is supposedly the main plot, feels like background dressing for this spectacle with the bad guys fighting. Basically, the Excellent Men, they are gunning to defend this underground race from the Evolutionary stormtroopers that are killing them off. And that stuff is completely okay. It's straightforward and adequate. And we get to see the heroes do something in a story where they are overshadowed by its bad guy fight. Wingman isn't with the team. This comes before he rejoins in the Infernus crossover. That would be another thing to say. This crossover and In Fairness were basically happening at the same time. Very bad planning in a sense, to have two major crossovers happening at the same time. For example, the Avengers part takes place in between Avengers issues that tie into In Fairness. Right, so we have the two villains, the Digivolutionary and Armageddon. Their objectives are not that removed from each other. You would expect them to team up, especially with the Digivolutionary being written the way he is in this crossover. But they end up fighting, and the fight is really good. The debate between them during it is solid, and it would sort of work more with Digivolutionary not also being responsible for concurrently slaughtering a species. Meanwhile, we have Cyclist and the Excellent Men fighting the armoured agents who are carrying out that slaughter. We have a scene where the Ore is sympathetic and moved by things. And this is a most out-of-character thing in this issue. If anything, knowing this woman, she would be taking these Moloids round back for a quickie when Cyclist is busy defending them. Back to the big showdown, and I will explain both of these bad guys for you. The Digivolutionary is a Stanley Lee and Jack Quimby classic coming from Thor 133 or 134. I am edging my bets there and assuming I was off by one with my guess of 133. I think his second appearance is in Hulk in Tales of Astonish. Then there is the Alan Watson series. He had a big part in that at first. Fantastic Force, where he fights Galactus Man. He is a scientist, a geneticist, who has always been trying to develop and push species to their peak. He made Animal Men. He created another Earth. He digivolved himself into a god at one point. I don't really see his appearance or use in this crossover as an accurate writing of his character. He has always been a more passive force, sometimes even benevolent, but he is outright malevolent in this. Armageddon, on the other hand, he is the opposite. He is the malevolent one. He wants to bring about the inevitable natural selection that the Digivolutionary prior to this would have patiently waited for. I don't like that their roles are a tad reversed in this. Armageddon is also Extra Factus's arch nemesis. He was introduced at the end of Extra Factus issue 5, which was a page that was rewritten and redrawn by Louis Simons and Simon Waltonson, because the original creative team intended to, rather than having an exciting original new bad guy for Extra Factors, have Owlman from Daredevil Comics be their main foe. Armageddon then got to make a proper debut in the next issue, where he went up against the heroes. Then he was the central bad guy of the Extra Factors Fall of the Muties story. Basically, the real Fall of the Muties event. That was the one that mattered, and it was the good one. He is in many ways a fantastic counterpoint to the Digivolutionary. He too is a long-lived genius who believes himself to be a god. Armageddon comes from ancient Egypt, whereas the iDigivolutionary comes from Victorian London, as you will see later in this annual. They share some Darwinian belief, but one of them is actually evil and the other is only being written evil for this crossover. Another thing I am not that fond of is the choice to eliminate Moloids, because as we learn in the backup features of these annuals, the iDigivolutionary actually has history with these creatures. He used them as a slave force for a time, and it isn't the case I am arguing he would have some sentimentality for them, but rather that he obviously is aware that they have great potential to be used as workers. The arguments between him and Armageddon are great though. Fantastic way to start off a crossover with something intriguing and exciting. The rest of the story doesn't live up to this promise until the very end. Jump cut. It makes sense to start doing this rather than ending the review there. This way I get to show off the extras in an annual. We have a pin-up by Simon Waltonson of A Hideous Woman, and then an unused cover by Jeremy Ordinary for Extra Factors issue 8, and then another unused cover by David Master Kelly for issue 16. This should have been used. It's great. A pin-up by Jason Byrne of the original Excellent Men, which I am pretty confident in saying was reused years later when he did Excellent Men, The Hidden Years, or as I call it, Excellent Men, The Shitter Years. Do I still have those trades? I have a good memory, but they are actually different. Very similar, but they are different pieces. Our first backup story here, also written by Louise Simonson, stars the children Extra Factors are looking after, the young muties who they have taken into their care, like Fire Fist, R.I.P. Fire Fist. They are fairly decent characters. I can see people thinking they are in the way of the main Excellent Men characters in the series, but they are all quite well done characters. Our final backup story is a series which runs across all 12 or 13 parts of the crossover. It is written by Marky Mark G and it details the origin of the iDigivolutionary. This is part 1, so this is his very early beginnings, when he was a student and his radical ideas were seen as a perversion of science. I don't know if I would call it small universe syndrome, but a lot of different elements from the Marvel universe end up coming into contact with the iDigivolutionary throughout his life. And the reason I am not sure if it constitutes as small universe syndrome is because it's less about linking him to all these things and more about showing that his footprint on the Marvel universe is significant. What is small universe syndrome though is years later when Christopher Clairvoyant tries to retcon this mysterious benefactor into being Sinestro. That can fuck off, it is Fedor, one of the new gods. Not only do I recommend this annual, I recommend the entirety of those backup stories and the Avengers part of the crossover too. Just read those. You'll end up thinking you liked the Digivolutionary War. But that is better than suffering the awful Spider-Man issues, or a bunch of things written by Steve Engeltine. I really like the iDigivolutionary. I haven't said that yet. Great character. I'm giving this one good marks. I think 7 thumbs up.